Okay, we're just greeting everyone. We're going to just give a few seconds here for people to get on into the Zoom meeting before we officially start the meeting of the Historical Commission here in just a few moments. So bear with us for a second. And Caitlin, or I see a Malcolm in the attendees that very well could be Malcolm Cornwell. So can you promote him to a panelist? You guys are muted. Did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I've attempted. I'm just waiting for him to, yeah, it looks like he's moving up now.
There we go.
Okay, great. All right, well then let's get started. Let's see, are we still just missing, oh, Mark is here, great. Okay, we will officially begin then the meeting of the, pardon me, of the Newburyport Historical Commission for Thursday, the 8th of July, 2021, another virtual meeting. We'll start with a roll call of members, alphabetical order, beginning with Mr. Malcolm Carnwath. You with us, Malcolm? I think we saw you in the, it looks like you're muted on your end, Malcolm. So see if you can get yourself unmuted while you're doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Thanks. Yep.
Mark Sandron.
Present.
Thank you, Mark. Getting an echo from somewhere. So if you're not actually speaking, it might be Malcolm. For some reason, I suspect it's you. So if you could mute while you're, that took care of it. Mr. Christopher Fay.
Here.
Here. Mr. Peter MacNamee.
Present.
Ms. Patricia Pecknick.
Present as well.
Okay, thank you. Chair Glenn Richards is here. Absent is Mr. Joe Morgan, and Andy Port and Caitlin Sullivan from the planning office are here, and note taker Gretchen Joy. The commissioners will have our audio enabled, except when they're muted, as we were just discussing, for technical reasons. And if we have a public hearing and you wish to speak, the way that's arranged is you use the Zoom control to, quote, raise your hand. There's a control on the Zoom panel if you're in like a web browser or an iPad or something of that nature. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise a hand and *6 to unmute. What happens is we'll unmute you on our end, but you need to also unmute you on your end, and then you'll be able to speak and we will be able to hear you and you can comment. That again during any public hearing. During the hearings that are on the agenda, of course, the presenters for the applicant will also be unmuted for their presentation. And just a reminder, commissioners, if you do make are the one making a motion or second, just mention your name so so we have that for the minutes. Okay, so having gone through that, let us begin. Let me just do one thing here. So I'm organized. The first item on the agenda is a hearing regarding a demolition delay application. This is 10 Sylvester Street. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Douglas Duchesne, is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes, sir, that is correct. Thank you.
Okay, so you'll be, are you, I assume, speaking on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll give you the floor in just a second. So just to kick this off, you'll see in Mr. Duchesne's presentation, it's an application that involves demolition of an auxiliary structure, namely a garage, and part of a primary structure, namely a residence, for the purpose of making an addition and renovation to that structure. So it is we have to make a finding tonight as to whether it's historically significant and whether or not it's considered for preservation. So we'll get to that after the presentation. So on that, Mr. Duchesne, I'll turn it over to you. As if you're in the meeting, you should be able to see your presentation slides on the screen.
I can. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good evening, Douglas Duchesne from Finneran and Nicholson, representing Jody and Stephen Peculian, the owners of the property at 10 Sylvester Street here in Newburyport. I'm hoping that Stephen and Jody are with us on the hearing. And if so, if we could unmute their microphones out would be appreciated. Before I begin my presentation, I first want to apologize to the board and to Caitlin for the issues we've been having in providing quality architectural drawings and being able to upload them into your system. I do apologize for those problems. And I do want to thank Caitlin for all of her patience and efforts in helping us to try and resolve those issues. And I do appreciate the board's time in hearing our presentation in light of our plan issues. With that, Mr. Chairman, if possible, Mr. Killian would like to make a quick statement before I dive into this presentation, if that's acceptable to the commission.
Yeah, that's fine. Go right ahead. I think he's unmuted on our, it looks a bit like he's unmuted.
All right, can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Great, thank you. Well, first, I want to thank you for allowing me and my wife Jody the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I'll keep my comments brief while attempting to give you some historical context about the house that you can use in your deliberations. My family's journey with this house began almost 60 years ago when my parents bought it from the Arata family. The Aratas were the original family who built the house in 1930. This is the house where I was born and raised. When I was young, it served as a meeting place for our extended family. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends would gather here to celebrate one thing or another. It was a place where people came in moments of crisis, of grief, for support, or to sit at the kitchen table with my mom to help get help with their homework, or it was just a place to come and relax by the pool on a hot summer day. I'm fortunate that I can still look around the property and understand the significance of things. The maybush, the limelight hydrangea, the carnations and the hedges that the Arata family planted, the arborvitaes around the yard that were given to my parents from my maternal grandparents, the rose bushes from my parents' beloved friends, Pat and Jerry Cody, and other sentimental plantings that mark special milestone events, the death of an uncle, in memory of a great uncle, the birth of a child, all things I intend to preserve. Inside the house are more memories for me. I remember sitting in my grandfather's room for hours listening to stories of his life and our family history, watching TV with him and laughing, and bringing his meals when he could no longer make it down the stairs. It is the house where I brought my youngest daughter home to when she was born, and where I had to tell both my children that my father, their grandfather, had passed away. I could go on about how sentimental and sacred this place is to me, and I think you would come to the conclusion, well, that this home is historically important to my family. It is only one small family story in the large arc of Newburyport's history, and therefore insignificant for the purposes of why we're here today. Excuse me. With regard to the structure itself, I think the pictures Douglas will share later will show there is nothing unique or noteworthy about the architecture. It is a Cape Cod style home that was built using materials common and readily available at the time. And there is no evidence that unique building methods were employed during its construct. What the pictures may not show is the house has gone through many updates through the years. The kitchen and main bathroom have been remodeled twice since my family owned the home. A bath was added on the first floor and remodeled. All the windows were replaced and the bedrooms and closets reconfigured. This is more a house from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s than the 1930s. We are seeking approval of the roofline change in order to modify the structure to meet the challenges we face in living in this multi-generational house today. The impetus for this submission is that we urgently need more bathrooms, closet and storage space, private meeting areas, and an updated kitchen. Well, I could theoretically sell this house and buy one that checks all these boxes. It is the emotional investment I have in it and in the neighborhood that won't let me. Many of the contractors I interviewed during this process said it would be much easier and more economical just to tear it down and start from scratch, which I fear will happen if I sell. I feel like the proposed changes in the plan submitted by Brian Libby will meet my family's needs, will address some of the structural concerns I have with this aging structure, make it more energy efficient, add elements of architectural interest that will enhance its curb appeal and allow it to play well in this neighborhood. Our hope is that once this house is finalized, it will remain viable for another 90 years and beyond. Thank you for allowing me to speak and for considering our application. I assure you that no one more than Jody and I are vested in doing the right thing with this property and in this neighborhood. Again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Stephen. Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'll move forward with the presentation.
Yes, and I probably should
If you could, if we could please move to the next slide.
yeah, and I should point out that for the sake of time, a lot of the I have no objection to your comments, Mr. Peculin. That was appreciated. So a lot of the materials or the information has been we already have in the form of the letter from the architect and other things. We do try to review all these materials prior to the meeting. So and so for your sake as well, Attorney Duchesne, it's not, we don't necessarily have to go through everything that's in there again. So just so you're aware of that.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I will move on along quickly. With respect to the project summary, as stated, the proposal is to raise the existing detached garage and to construct an addition onto the existing home. And I want to make it clear to the commission because I understand there was some confusion and I did submit a revised cover letter to address it, but the garage is not old enough to qualify for review because it's less than 100 years old as an accessory structure. So other than letting you know we're raising the detached garage, it wasn't our intention to have you review the historical significance of that, as I don't believe it's triggered. However, the house does meet the age requirement for review. So we're technically here for your review with respect to the proposed changes to the house itself.
Yeah, that's understood.
That addition will include an attached garage, a third floor addition, a new farmer's porch on the front, and a pool house, which again, not necessarily a consideration for the commission, but we were trying to be complete in our application. In order to do the addition and to make the changes proposed, we would be removing a deck off the back of the house, and we would be removing the existing front entranceway, which will be replaced with the farmer's porch. I've given you the height of the structures, both existing and proposed, and we believe the proposed addition is in keeping with many of the surrounding homes, especially those recently redeveloped or improved upon. And again, as we know, the existing structure being constructed in 1930 qualifies us for the demolition delay ordinance, but again, not the garage. We go to the next slide. This just gives you an overview of the lot along Sylvester Street. You will see that it's a larger lot than most of the lots. The existing house is centered on the lot, although pushed closer to the street than it is to the rear. The pool is on the right side of this picture and the existing garage on the left. And next slide, please. So this picture is a picture of the front of the house. This is the front entranceway that will be removed and replaced with an open farmer's porch. The picture to the right shows the left side of the house and the existing garage, which is set back on the lot. Next slide, please. This first picture on the right, on the left, is from the driveway looking across the front of the house. And what I tried to do was get the neighboring home in the picture. It is on the far side of the lot across from the pool, but it is a structure of similar design and size, if not a little bigger. But I did want to try and get some context for you. And then again, the picture on the right is just the left side of the house and the front porch. Next slide, please. Moving around down Sylvester, this picture on the left, I wanted to show you the house to the left. You can see the gray house. It's a fairly new design and new structure and quite large. And it does sit at the far end of the other lot. So again, giving you some perspective. The picture on the right, we're starting to now move around the right side of the structure on where the pool is located. Next slide, please. And then here's a complete picture of that left side where the pool is located. And the picture on the right here is that same side, but this is what you see from the street. The existing vegetation and the fence pretty much block the view of the house from the street. Next slide. Here's a picture of the left side across the pool. And again, you can see the gray house in the background that is on the other side, again, trying to give you some perspective. And lastly, a picture from the rear of the house. You know, my goal here was to provide you a visual representation of the house so that you can see what the architectural styling of the house is, and you know, be able to determine whether or not there is any historically significant character here in this house. As Stephen said, it was built in the 1930s using common materials and has only subsequently been updated and modified, you know, over the years. So what these pictures represent is pretty much the original styling of the house and as it remains today. Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, I will just skip through these. As you said, the board has these, but what we did here was try and provide you a height of the existing building and what it looks like in elevation. The next slide is the proposed structure, and we had our architect put the heights on here, and this is where we ran into the problem with being able to see them. But if we could just skip through these, again, given the fact that the chairman has said that you have these, I'll just skip through. If we could just go down to the next slide that has the writing on it, I'll wrap up. We did do some historical research on the home to see if we could find any information regarding the property. We conducted a research through the Massachusetts Cultural Resources System and the MACRIS map system. However, no results were found. There was nothing significant provided by those searches. We did do a review of the Sanborn maps as well. However, it was determined that the latest map applicable was dated on 1914. And as we know, the house was constructed thereafter in 1930. We did look through the Essex National Heritage website. However, again, nothing of historical significance or information with respect to this property was found. We then looked at the only source that we could, and that was the owners of the property. And as Mr. Peculian said to you, this house was built in 1930 by the Arata family. It's a Cape Cod style home. We don't believe there was anything historically significant in the design of the construction materials. And prior to that, the land was actually much like most of the land used for farming purposes. 2 generations of the Aratas owned the house, which then sold to the Peculians in '63. And 4 generations of Peculians have lived there since. As Stephen said, many changes have been made over the years. Solar panels were added. However, they were removed recently. And again, they're looking to make further investment into the home to, in essence, preserve this home for their family. However, they do need to make it effective as a home in today's world, and given the fact that they do have extended family living in the home with them. So, yeah, in conclusion, members of the commission, if we could go to the last slide. The home was constructed in 1930. It is subject to your demolition delay ordinance. However, our research indicates that there's no historical use of the house during its life, nor is any of the architecture historically significant. And I will conclude with saying, as you stated, Mr. Chairman, our architect, who's unable to be here tonight due to a family medical situation, he has opined that in his opinion, he didn't determine that there was any historical significant construction or other materials within the home.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So let me now turn to my comrades on the commission. And ask if anyone has a question. I see Patricia has a hand raised. Do you have a question or for the applicant, Patricia?
Yes, may I just ask a couple questions based on my attempt to read the plans and piece the information together? So one of the slides says the proposed structure height is 26.4 and it will go to 29. But when I looked at the plans, the architect has said it's currently 26.4 to peak, and it will be 34.6 to peak. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So you're removing the roof and rebuilding 8 feet higher to make a third floor. Am I correctly reading the plans and the other materials? Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. The sort of the peak, if you will, of the roof will be removed, and a full story will be constructed on that level. And then, of course, the garage will be directly attached. The distinctions in the heights, and I can check, but I know that I try to report the median height of structures, which is what the bylaws require. And I believe the architect is providing peak heights.
Yeah, he sort of does both. Excuse me a second, just Patricia. I think
Yeah.
in that slide we just saw, that in summary, he had the peak or the ridge height of the existing and the median height of the proposed. So it was a little confusing. If you compare apples to apples, it's the old ridge or existing ridge is like 29, give or take. The new ridge is like 34.5 feet. So yeah, that was a little confusing. And I think we sort of figured it out, but I'm glad Patricia's kind of getting that straightened out so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, it looks like about 8 feet, like another floor. Okay, I just want to make sure I was reading that correctly. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, it is essentially an additional floor. Any other questions from the commission? Not seeing any. It's not a requirement, but I can offer, hang on a second, the panelist hand just went up. Peter MacNamee, did you have a question for the applicant?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I'm having trouble reading the plan, so if it's on here, forgive me. But what's the siding treatment going to be on the property, and what are the new roofs going to be?
Stephen, wood shingles or wood siding?
So wood shingles or wood siding? Can you clarify that?
No, I was asking Mr. Peculian to verify that for me.
I don't think he's on the
Well, he's
right
showing in the attendee list. Caitlin, can you please see if you can enable? There you go.
Hello. Hello, I'm unmuted now. So
yes, you are.
we're kind of debating or contemplating what materials to use. Right now, there are cedar shingles on the house, but we think we're gonna go with more like a hardy plank for durability. As far as the roof, it currently has asphalt shingles and it's likely to remain such.
Okay. And the chimney that's shown between the addition and the original house, can you describe that in a little more detail? I don't see any
Yeah,
detail
there
on
is.
that.
Yeah, so the chimney that's in the drawing right now doesn't exist in the current house, so it's just gonna be added into what is our living room structure. Again, the materials, we're still deciding on those, but it'll be probably like a fieldstone look chimney or something appropriate for the house, maybe brick.
It's not going to be a sided box.
No, it's
Okay.
gonna be some kind of like stone type of veneer or structure. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. MacNamee. Let's see, double check with the panelists. So although what I was about to start saying, it's not necessarily a requirement, but I can open it very briefly to see if there's any one present in the attendee list, member of the public that has a comment to make as to, at this point, where our decision is as to whether the house is historically significant or not. So I'll open a brief public comment period. If you want to make a comment, please use the Zoom function to raise your hand. You can see the instructions being shown on the meeting here. Again, if it's the phone, that's star 9 to raise a hand and star 6 to unmute. So we'll just give a moment, and I'm not sure there'll be any public comment, but just wanted to provide that opportunity. So we'll just allow a few seconds to see if anyone wants to raise a hand. And if not, we'll carry on. All right, Caitlin, I'm not seeing any, do you?
Not at this time, Chair.
All right, then I'll officially close the public comment period. And the board will deliberate on this and then have a motion as to whether or not it's historically significant. And just to clarify the procedure here, it's a little bit, well, we've wrestled with this, but basically there were kind of two decisions. One is it historically significant? If it's not, if we deem it to not be historically significant, that's the end of the proceeding and you're go on your merry way. If it is historically significant, there's a further decision as to whether or not it's to be considered for preservation. If it's, because it might be historically significant, but not considered for preservation, in which case you also go on your merry way. If it is considered for preservation, that demolition delay that you mentioned is put into effect, but we can review your plans for what you want to do, and if we're okay with the proposed plans, that demo delay can be lifted either at this meeting or at a future one if there's something that needs to be resolved with those plans. So the first question is it historically significant? And one more thing I'll say is that the whole thing about the age, 7,500 years for accessory structure, the way I understand it, and I'm pretty confident I understand it correctly, that the 75-year trigger triggers the consideration as to whether it is historically significant or not. Doesn't automatically mean it is, but it means that it needs to be reviewed to see if the board thinks it is. So the question before us would be, do we think it's historically significant or not? So any deliberation, can anyone from the commission have an opinion on that? I'd like to hear from you all, and then we'll take a motion. Ms. Becknick, would you like to begin?
Yes, no, I was just going to add some information about the context buildings. Usually we like to see photos of surrounding houses. I realize we're getting a glimpse of them here. But it is, it's a very small, it's just a block long. Most of the houses are that Cape style. Some are as small as 972 square feet. You know, there's one that's 1,013. Most of them were built in the 30s, right up to 1952. There's one other house on that block that is, I would say, comparable in size to what's being proposed at number 13. It's down in the corner. I think that was built in 2018, but it is just so I know we don't, if in case people didn't do the site visits, or because we don't have photos of all the abutting structures, I just wanted to throw that in there, that it is mostly a street of capes that are comparable in size to that one. That's all.
Yes, and I'll add just a quick comment to your comments, Patricia, that I did drive, kind of circle the block and a couple blocks nearby, and probably somewhere between a half to 2/3 of the houses are kind of comparable in size to what's existing. A lot of kind of small-ish capes and fairly, modest houses. There are a couple of new houses which are considerably larger, as they tend to be, and a couple look like they have been renovated and modernized and added to over the years, mostly probably within the past 10 to 20 years, and are now built to be comparable in size to what's being proposed here. So on Sylvester Street, it would stand out a little bit size-wise because it is such a small street, but overall in the neighborhood, I came to the conclusion that the comment made by the architect that it's not terribly out of place, so to speak. I'm referring now to the proposed construction. Wouldn't be wildly out of place. Anyone else on the board like to make a comment?
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead, Malcolm.
I think this house is not historically significant, and I think we should wish these people good luck and go forward.
Okay. Thank you, Malcolm. Mr. Fay or Mark Cendrone, Peter, we heard from Peter a little bit. Anyone else have an opinion?
Yeah, I'm just cruising around the neighborhood here on Google Maps, and it's which is a nice way to do it. But I think I tend to agree with Malcolm on this one. It's kind of I think it will definitely be the largest building in the neighborhood besides the hospital, but I don't know. It's tough. I would hate to see this whole neighborhood become just demolished because there's some nice little houses here, but I understand the applicant's history here, and they're committed to the neighborhood at the same time. So,
yeah,
I will tend to agree with Malcolm on this one.
Yeah, and I don't know what the multi-generational part of Mr. Peculian's situation is, but I can, if it's anything like the one I experienced here in my own home, where we had my wife's parents, and now I've got my adult kids here, I totally understand the whole multi-generational thing, which is becoming more and more common. So, I definitely get that.
I would tend to agree also.
Okay, that sounded like Mr. Cendrone.
Yeah, Mark Cendrone. I don't think this is historically significant.
All right, well, why don't we, the chair.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. I just, not apropos of this, but apropos of sort of the larger thing. There are definitely going to be some historically significant homes in this neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure this is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But we've talked about this a little bit before. We can't just sort of dismiss the neighborhood because it's Cape houses that were built in the 20s and the 30s either. So while I restate my position, I do want to just maybe put that on the record that as I'm looking around this neighborhood, there's a lot of,
yeah,
I think there's more significance here than we might imagine. So
yeah, thank you for saying that, Chris. I couldn't agree with you more. It's very important. I mean, part of our mission, of course, on this board is to preserve the streetscape in its scale and massing. And there's some just really, really charming, lovely, smaller houses on that street. So I agree with what Chris said, and I wouldn't want to make it come across as if, oh, it's a Cape, so whatever. No, it's obviously was part of this streetscape. And I was very happy to hear from the property owner and appreciate that he took the time to come and speak to us, and his phrase about allowing it to play well in the neighborhood. I think that's really important.
Okay, and I see Mr. MacNamee has raised a hand. Did you have a comment, Peter?
Yeah, to throw my hat in with all the previous comments, I'm also in favor of the work that's proposed here. I could wish, along the same lines as what Commissioner Pecknick was just saying, and what Chris Bay was saying with regards to the streetscape. I could wish that the presentation were more complete, that the drawings were more readable, that there were photos of the streetscape. Like Chris, I'm cruising the neighborhood on Google right now, which is helpful, but it is an incomplete application from that respect. So we can fill in the gap regarding the streetscape by using Google. We can't really fill in the gap on the drawings, which are, I don't know if it's just my computer rendering or whatnot, or if there's something very, very sketchy about those sketches. There's very little information on them, and it seems very vague. So my only point of discomfort here is approving a project that we can't really fully picture right now.
Okay, a couple of comments I'll make on that. First, to the neighborhood, as I mentioned that cruise, I think one of the graces here is the large size of the lot. But putting that whole thing aside, I want to talk to the two things. One, as far as the renderings, Peter, you're quite correct. It's not just you or your computer or your monitor. The nature of the original sketches, I suspect, and also the way they were scanned and so on, that we're still a little bit in a learning curve of the kind of online submissions where the applicants load up their scans and electronic documents. There's a little bit of that involved, and judging from the fact that the plans don't have all the materials called out, as you yourself pointed out, we don't have call outs on exactly what type of windows, what type of cladding for the walls, etc. The applicant themselves seemed a little unsure of some of those details. So it sounds like it's a bit of a work in progress, right? So that's very understandable. And if we were to decide that it was historically significant and to be considered for preservation, we would probably have to have a continuance to have them come back with all those details so that we could make a definitive determination on the plans because of those ambiguities. If, however, it's the motion that is historically significant fails, as I'm kind of gathering it probably would, and that's not historically significant, then that's the end of our role, so to speak, in terms of oversight of the plans. So it becomes sort of moot at that point. But yeah, I definitely hear you. Am I making sense, Peter? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, and to your original statement, the size of the lot does matter here. The streetscape, preserving the streetscape is a concern, but it moves a little further down the list for me because this is such a large lot. So I think that buffers the impact a little bit.
Yeah. Yes.
But for my money, to be fair to other applicants who are required to make a complete application that's legible and fully understandable, I'm hesitant to do anything other than move to some sort of resolution that would call for a continuance so that we could get a better picture and then very likely say, yes, go ahead. The question of historical significance, there is historical significance here just by virtue of the age of the property and by the story of the property that the homeowner himself so eloquently presented. So, you know, to that end, I would be in favor of discussing historical significance and a continuance so that we could get a complete application, get a very clear idea of the treatment of the exterior of the house, and then hopefully give it a blessing.
Okay. I think my inclination is to see if there is interest in having a vote now on historical significance, and see if that we would need 4 affirmative votes for that to pass, or go down, so to speak. The motions are normally made in an affirmative phrasing, so the motion would be that the
Chair?
House is, yeah.
Can I interrupt for a second and ask a question of procedure?
Yeah.
Is it necessary to have that vote? Could we, could we discuss the question of how comfortable we are with the materials that have been presented, and possibly that discussions could inspire the applicant to request a continuance, and we could discuss it in a couple of weeks?
Well, you could certainly make a motion to suggest that. I'm just thinking that if, as I was saying a minute ago, if 4 or more members agree that it's not historically significant, then the quality of the plans kind of becomes moot, because the Historical Commission no longer has any jurisdiction over those at that point. See what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So, so I'm trying to think which is the cart and which is the horse as far as which we do first. My thought was, if we go ahead and well, we could do a straw poll. So I guess
I'd be curious to just hear what the rest of the commission thinks along these lines.
Yeah, we could do that. Do sort of not an official vote, but we could do a straw poll. Does anyone on the board here, I see Mark and Tricia both have hands raised? Why don't we start with Mark? I think I saw your hand first, Mr. Sandron.
It's all a matter of context here. Obviously, we certainly would like to know what ultimately happens to the house, and the applicant's attempt to show what it may be are clearly incomplete. But I think at this point, given what we have, I find it very hard to think that this has huge historical significance. And by knowing what is going to be used for adornment on the house, I don't think has a great deal of significance at this point. Just my feeling.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Mark. And Patricia?
I do agree with Mr. MacNamee, sorry, Peter, about the incompleteness of the application. It took me quite a long time to figure out that a 3rd story was being built. And I did go around the neighborhood and take houses so that I understood how old and how big and what this house looks like in the context of the other houses. And I am frustrated when applications are incomplete. I would prefer to see a complete application as well. But I'm also willing to vote on historical significance if that's what the commission prefers to do tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Patricia. Mr. Fay or Mr. Cornwell, any opinion on this particular deliberation matter here?
I think it's, go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
No, go ahead, Malcolm.
I think we're gonna have a lot of different cases around town in historic neighborhoods. We're going to be looking at Greek revival houses and Gothic revivals and Federals and Colonials and Georgians. And I think this house doesn't have any historical value, and I don't think we should inhibit these people in any way from going about their plans. I think they're going to do it in such a way with the zoning department, the building department. And I don't think getting into whatever they do has any bearing on our commission, and I think we ought to let them go.
Mhm. Okay, and I would just add one thing. I've been thinking about this. In some ways, the ordinance seems a little awkward in that way, in that if it's not historically significant, then we no longer consider the plans. But when you think about it, it sort of makes sense in that if you're dealing with a structure that is deemed to not be, quote, historically significant, because it, George Washington didn't sleep there, and nor did either because of if historical events, context, or some unique aspect of the architecture, then then as far as the role of the historic commission, that we don't really have a role. On the other hand, if it's a house that we deem it must be considered for preservation, then it's appropriate that the historical commission does play a role in reviewing plans in greater detail, looks at things like window treatments, cladding, roofing, et cetera. So it sort of makes sense in that way. At least that's how I tend to look at it. Ms. Pecknick, Patricia, I noticed your hand is still up. Was that an accident, or did you want to say something else?
It was an accident, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, we've heard from just about everyone. Which motion do we want to hear? I think that the consensus I'm kind of feeling from the board is that people are okay to take a vote on historical significance. So that's the way I'm leaning right now. Is anyone prepared to make such a motion? Again, just to refresh your memory, the motions are typically done in the affirmative. So the motion would be that it is historically significant, but if you agree that it's not, then you would obviously vote no. Is there a motion to be made? Don't be shy.
I'll make a motion that it's not historically significant.
Okay.
Is that correct?
I'll accept that. Is there a second?
Okay, I'm so,
Second that, Chris.
didn't you say that emotions had to be in the affirmative? I'm confused about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. Well, it's sort of an affirmative that it's not significant. But all right, so Malcolm, if this is a kind of a point that we historically haven't been all that adamant on, the motions typically are phrased as a positive statement, like the structure is historically significant. If you think it's not historically significant, you would vote no. And even if you're making the motion, doesn't necessarily mean you think it's significant. We ran into this a couple of weeks ago with Mr. Fay, I believe. The awkwardness of making a motion that something is significant when you know darn well you're going to vote no. So the chair will amend the motion. The motion would be that the structure is historically significant. Is there a second for that so we can take a vote?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mark Sandrone. All right, so let's go around the roll call here, starting with Malcolm Conrath.
No.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Mark Sandrone.
No.
Okay, now Mr. Christopher Fay.
I'm a no.
Okay, thank you. Peter MacNamee.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Patricia Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair, oh boy. The chair is gonna side in this case with, or vote no, along with Messrs. Conrath, Sandrone, and Fay. So we have, I count 4 votes in the negative, which is sufficient to defeat that particular motion. I would encourage the applicant to can think about what was discussed here tonight. We're kind of taking it as kind of bit on faith and trust based on your statements and what you've made about your personal history and with the house and the neighborhood, and your desire to be a good neighbor and be a good steward of both the structure and the neighborhood. And so we hope you will live up to those anticipated and or expectations, and if I think and execute a plan that will result in an attractive residence for you and your family. Any other comments from anyone before we close this item? Not seeing any. Okay, so Mr. Deshane and Mr. And Mrs. Peculin, you do not have to go under a demolition delay. The planning board will be notified that, and the building commissioner will be notified that if and when you're ready to actually proceed, you will be permitted to do the demo of the garage and the partial demo of the house, so you can do your addition. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, thank you very much. And members of the board, thank you. Caitlin, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all.
And one last comment, and not about this particular, but as a general comment, Peter, I do take your concerns very seriously, and Patricia had similar ones. I actually had similar ones myself about both the legibility and completeness of drawings and so forth. We are continuing to work with the planning board, Caitlin and Diane, who kind of work with applicants. We will continue to work on that so that we get to the point where we no longer have to be scratching our heads over, like, what did they mean? What does this mean? Is something missing, and so on. And I should further note that I think there's even changes to the ordinance language to the effect that if a application is incomplete, the clock does not start on our, when we need to make a decision until it is complete. So that will mean that we won't be under time pressure. It'll be the applicant. So I see both of you have hands raised. Patricia, I think I saw yours first. Did you want to say something?
Yes, I'm just encouraging everyone to do site visits as often as you can on any of these applications. It's one thing to look at
Right.
photos that an applicant has submitted. It's quite a different thing to walk on foot down the street and look at the other houses of a similar style and a similar age. And I think it's really important to do it. Applicants, of course, are supposed to submit photos. That's a requirement, but please see for yourself, as often as you can, as many times as you can. Go back more than once. And that's my recommendation and my request. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I agree completely, Patricia. Peter, did you have a comment also?
Chair, just to, I appreciate your comments, and I agree with them. And just to be clear on this, absent, if these drawings had been completed, this application had been more understandable. And I recognize it's they presented what they had, and maybe there were technical issues. Then there's no question in my mind either that it would have gotten my blessing, certainly, just to move forward, because I think what they're doing is terrific. I think I'm completely behind a multi-generational setting, improving the streetscape, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think it's not fair to other applications in the future if we allow this sort of a presentation and move forward with it. So in the best of all possible worlds, I would have liked to have seen this come back a couple of weeks later, more understandable, so that at that point we could all reach that consensus of, okay, this is a good thing these people are doing. Let's go ahead and give it. That's fair to all the applicants. So I would just encourage, maybe this is a point that the commission needs to take up to discuss. How do we ensure that applications are in fact ready for consideration, which you began to address there. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think both Diane and Caitlin are kind of, and Jennifer as well are very much on that particular case, Peter. Ms. Pecknick, I see your hand.
I just want to agree with Peter. I think that if this had been a house from 1760, and there was no demo plan, and the cover materials didn't mention removing the roof and raising it 8 feet,
Right.
people would react very differently. So I
Yeah.
just want to treat people fairly and make sure that we have all the information we need, no matter how old the house is, no matter if it needs to be painted or not, right?
Yeah, that point is well taken from both you folks, and I've made a note of that, and yep, I concur. Sorry about that telephone ringing in the background. Okay, so we move to the next item on our agenda. This is the review of the preservation restriction for 64 Purchase Street. This is the, I believe it's the People's United Methodist Church. Some of you, particularly, well, Joe Morgan isn't here tonight, but I know this started out, they came to us to help them with the preservation. Well, let me back up a minute. They meaning the church, was seeking Community Preservation Act funding to help them preserve their steeple and possibly weather vane, but certain aspects of their structure. The way that works, I may have explained this before, but if a organization or structure is getting CPA funds, there needs to be a public benefit. And the public benefit in a case like this is that the public gets a preservation restriction on the edifice so that it will be preserved in perpetuity for the enjoyment of the public, which may sound a little bit of a stretch, but do recall this is almost right on the rail trail, so it's not quite as invisible as one might think, tucked away in the south end there. So anyway, that is the public benefit. So they agreed to be the grantor of a preservation restriction that the Historical Commission would hold. And I would mention that and you see it in the correspondence part of the agenda, the Massachusetts Historical Commission has taken a look at it and given it their pre-signature approval. So that means if we look it over and and the city grants its signs off on it, then it can go back to the Mass Historical Commission with us knowing pretty much what its fate will be there. So having given that preamble, I believe Ms. Nikitish is going to talk to this. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine, thank you.
Okay, good. I don't want to repeat anything and I will be as brief as possible. But just on the timeline, the church was awarded a CPA grant of $7,500, the partial amount for what they needed to restore their steeple in July 2017. So what happened with the church, as happens often with CPA grantees, is they, large or small, they don't understand how to go about getting a preservation and getting written and approved. So the church is still waiting to receive $7,500 of their grant. And it's a small church. They have done the steeple restoration, and because this was, this is a problem for them in the spring of 2020, the Newburyport Preservation Trust offered to help them primarily by funding the hiring of a consultant, Eric Dray, who is a specialist, preservation specialist, and among his specialties is preparing preservation restrictions, which meet Massachusetts state law. So we first presented this to a draft preservation restriction to the NHC in September of 2020. You agreed to hold it after we made after requesting some amendments, which Mr. Dray made. It was then submitted in October 2020 to the Massachusetts Historical Commission because it requires their approval, really first of all. And their first comments from the October submission were some requests for changes more as to legal form, but the big one was that they said all of the baseline photographs had to be retaken, both without foliage and without snow on the ground. And it wasn't possible to do this until March 2021.
That's interesting.
So as soon as there was no snow on the ground, the photographs were all retaken. And that month, March 2021, this amended draft PR was submitted to the MHC. After this, they came back twice, again with some minor changes to form, but also with revisions to the legal property description. That involves a very complicated deed history, which was finally, with Mass Historical's help and our assessor's office and Eric Dray, was sorted out. So what you are looking at is what, after all of this, the Massachusetts Historical Commission came back and said, we pre-approve this draft if you make one more change, which you will see in the draft you have has been made. So this is something that applicants work very hard for, sometimes for 2 years or more. And that is MHC pre-approved PR that can then be approved by the city council. So given the amount of time that the church has been waiting for their funds and the diligence that once they understood what they needed to do, the diligence and timeliness with which they have pursued the MHC approval, we hope that you will now approve what's before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nikitish. And I would agree with your last comment there that given, we have seen a lot of problems and delays and preservation restrictions taking quite a while and so on. I can think of one off the top of my head that's actually maybe two that are in the years category. Anyway, so let me turn to my fellow commissioners here. Does anyone have a question for Stephanie on this? Stephanie, what was the correction that you said has been made in this version? Remember what it was?
Primarily, and there are several of them. And the planning office actually, I believe, has all of the correspondence from MHC, which details the language, but it all has to do with the property description and the deed records, which did get very complicated. But this is all, it reflects what Massachusetts Historical has asked for. And that can be, sort of double checked with the MHC correspondence.
Yeah, and I think I was copying on a number of those, and you're absolutely right. There was a lot of discussion of the correct, to get the correct description, which is rather important.
Mr. Chairman, may I just add that I, Zoom meetings, you can't tell, but I do believe that Mr. Duncan McBurney, who is the chair of the church's board of trustees, is on the call, as is Tom Coulterjohn, the co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust, if anyone has questions for the church or for the trust. Okay, very good. I see one of my commissioners, Patricia Pecknick, has a hand raised. Did you have a question or comment, Patricia?
My comment is, I really appreciate all the work that went into this. It's very comprehensive. It's very detailed. It was wonderful to read it. It's a fantastic building. So thanks to everyone. And I'll just quote my colleague Malcolm from the prior meeting and say, let's give these people what they want.
Thank you, Patricia. Caitlin, could you go to page 3? Okay, and scroll down just a little bit more. I found what you can kind of call a typo. Let's see. Right here, yeah. Okay, on the paragraph number 1, purpose, go down, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's go down to about the 6th line, which begins characteristics that contribute. It says characteristics that contribute to the architectural and historical integrity of the property, include, comma, but are not limited to. I think the word including is spurious. Could that be correct? Should be integrity of the property include, but are not limited to, comma, right?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I would agree that that is probably a typographical
Yeah.
error.
I felt so confident that it was, and it doesn't change the intent that I didn't bother, firing off emails to Mr. Steinitz, so the commissioner in Massachusetts, but I will let them, well, we can kind of give them the heads up. There's that one change. That was the only thing I saw. I thought it was well written. I think, but you and Mr. Dre and everything. I echo Ms. Pecknick's comments. You guys spent a lot of time and effort on this, and it shows. It looks like it's well written, and I didn't see anything that I could find that in any way contradicted or went against the understanding that we had when we first started talking about this. When Mr. McBurney, I remember we were meeting in the city council chambers back then. I remember that meeting well, and so I don't see any problem with it. We should take a vote on this. I hope that my fellow commissioners have had a chance to review it. We should have a motion that the Newburyport Historical Commission has reviewed this draft and sends it forward to the mayor and council for approval. Is there such a motion?
I will make that motion, yes.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Is there a second?
I'll second it. This is Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So let me go around the horn just 1 second here. Okay, Malcolm Conworth, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mark Syndrome,
Yes.
thank you. Christopher Fay,
Yes.
thank you. Peter MacNamee,
Yes.
thank you. Patricia Pecknick,
Yes.
and the chair is also a yes. So we are unanimous in that. So, Mr. McBurney, Duncan, I remember your presentation well, and I wish you the best. I know, you guys are working really hard to do the best you can over there. What she said and what he said, we wish you the best and hope that you can find, get this through. And I know that your funds are contingent on it, so we hope that all goes well for you.
Chairman Richards,
Yes.
on behalf of my wife and the church as a whole, we'd like to thank your committee. We'd like to thank the Preservation Trust Committee, of especially Stephanie and Tom Coldejon. They've worked tirelessly on this for us. It's been a long time coming. We started the project in 2016, and here we are, 2021.
Yeah.
I know that there's always a process you go through. And, I just can't thank any of them, and Eric Dre especially, that the work that they put into this Preservation Trust Agreement. And I thank all of you.
Very good. And you're welcome, at least on my behalf. And I would echo your comments. I didn't mention the Preservation Trust. So Stephanie and Tom and whoever else may have worked on that, your efforts are certainly appreciated. Because I do think that preserving these historic buildings scattered around the city is an important thing. And I know that's what you guys must have had in mind when you helped with this. So we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have that, and that will be, that will be for, I guess, Andy will be forwarding that to the mayor and the city council. Will get that on their agenda. I'm not sure, if, I'm not sure if it'll make it for their next meeting, but it'll be pretty soon. I'm not sure to whom it goes first. whether it's the
Yeah,
mayor
that'll
or the
probably go
council.
in August.
Yeah, okay. Who does it go to first, Andy? Is it the mayor or the council?
The council.
Okay. Okay, the chair doesn't have any other updates. Does anyone else on the board have anything else? Oh, we do need to approve the minutes from June 24. So we'll hear, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the 24th of June meeting?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mr.
June
Fay.
24.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Yes.
Oh, I think, okay, Patricia, thanks. Okay, Malcolm?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, actually, yeah, sorry, you were here. Mark, we'll abstain you. I don't think you were here last meeting, correct?
Present, yep.
Okay, Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. MacNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Patricia Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is okay too. Okay, so we'll approve those minutes. Thank you, Gretchen. The chair doesn't have any other updates. Does anyone else have anything to add? If not, someone is at liberty to move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
That sounded like Mr. Syndrome.
Mark Sendron.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Is that seconded?
I'll second that. It's Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Hang on a second here. Give me 1 second. Oh, that's not- Okay, Malcolm Conrath, your vote on adjournment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mark Syndrome?
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter MacNamee?
Yes.
Thank you. Patricia Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair also votes yes to adjourn. So we are formally and officially adjourned. I thank you all for your attention, attendance, and work on this. And we will see you again in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Good night, all.
Bid you all a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.